Hey everyone, just a heads up that this episode includes topics such as slavery and sex trafficking, and that they will be in the episode. So please be advised and enjoy the show. Hey Jason, you feeling lucky?
I never have, and I don't think I ever will.
Have you thought about getting a cat?
No.
Have you thought about becoming a cat?
No.
Cats are the symbol of wealth, sex, and fashion.
Tell me more. As the sand falls through the hourglass, so these are the days of seemingly unrelated elements of history, culture, and society coming together into your very special ear holes. I am one of your hosts. I am Jason Heat. I am a award-winning writer, director, producer of media and live entertainment. I am a professional wrestling commentator and creative, and of course, a podcaster, and I am for hire. I am joined, as always, by the face that runs the place. He is Dr., Mr., Professor, Lord, Sir, the distinguished gentleman, Andrew Johnstone.
I still can't wait for my MBE. Yes, I'm Dr. Andrew Johnstone, lecturer, digital humanities at King's College London.
Last but not least, rounding up the three musketeers is our producer, editor, and Gen Z ambassador, Naomi.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good... I was going to say a good Saturday, but it's not coming out on a Saturday. Hope you're having a good day.
Usually comes out on a Tuesday.
I hope you're having a good Tuesday. Pretend that we're recording this on a Tuesday today also.
Whatever day it is, we hope it's decent. Because really, who can ask for more in this economy? If you have never joined us before for seemingly unrelated, here's the pitch. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, and Andrew Johnston knows a lot about a few different subjects. He has put together a journey that connects seemingly unrelated ideas, and we're all going to find out together exactly how he sees the world and how he's going to blow our minds super quick. Hey, if you're a fan, if you like this show, please go ahead and rate, review, subscribe. Wherever you watch, we're on YouTube, wherever you listen to these podcasts, it makes a huge difference. Tell a human being, tell a friend. And of course, if you want to support, we are on Patreon. Look us up, only $2 a month. You get bonus episodes. So without further ado, Mr. Stone, where are we going in the world today?
Hey, this is just future Andrew cutting in here. This episode has a bunch of slides that I made, which will be available on the YouTube or anywhere where we have this in video form that we will be referencing. But don't worry, we'll still describe the things, so you won't be completely missing out. But you might enjoy all the hard work I put into making them by watching the video version as well. Do both. So, Jason... We're gonna take a fun ride. We're gonna, when you're on the rapids and there's like the scary side, we're gonna go to the other side of the fence.
The coward side.
Actually, I was gonna say this is gonna get real scary. Never mind. When you're at a Chinese restaurant, Jason.
I do.
And you're checking out at the end of the meal. There's that little cat. There's that little wavy cat with the hand that goes back and forward. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, right? So for those of you watching on the YouTube, there's some slides. I've got the slide of the cat up right now. But Jason...
Good luck, cat.
Yeah, it's a good luck cat, right? Lucky cat.
Hello, catty.
Right? He's a little cat, sometimes white, sometimes gold.
Why is it a he?
Well, actually, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But it'll make more sense later. And he usually has either a bell around his collar, or, as we see here in the image, sometimes he's holding on to a gold coin, right? Lucky cat. And you call him that, right? Good luck cat.
I mean, I did today. I don't usually call him anything. He's not real.
Naomi, do you call it good luck cat?
I think a lucky cat. Yeah.
Yeah, but that is the association. And where do you normally see it? I said a Chinese restaurant, Jason, but I don't know. Do you see these anywhere else?
Stores?
Stores? What kind of stores?
Ones that sell gifts and tchotchkes? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, right? I've seen them at the odd Chinese laundrette.
Yeah, I guess my question becomes, is this specifically a Chinese symbol or is it a Pan-Asian symbol? Because I don't know.
Well, what would you guess? If you had to guess, what would you most associate Lucky Cat with?
Now that you've said that, I'm going to associate it specifically with Chinese food restaurants because there is a restaurant in the area called Lucky Danger, and I think that their mascot is a cat, and so now I've decided that that's all connected.
Yeah, but it is typically in the United States and in the United Kingdom associated with Chinese restaurants, Chinese laundromats, Chinese like shops that sell, like you said, tchotchkes or something along those lines. So we associate it with Chinese culture, but in fact, Jason, the Lucky Cat is from Japan. Its name...
I was going to say anime stores, and I didn't want to be shitty. I truly in my head believed that that's where I'd seen it, but because you led with Chinese restaurants, I was like, I don't want to subconsciously...
I manipulated outcomes, Jason.
You did. You're like a mentalist.
What I wanted you to say.
I
am a mentalist. Certainly. No, it's from Japan. It's called...
So I'm not wrong. I have seen it in anime stores.
You have seen it in anime stores,
okay.
For sure. It's Maneki Neko, or Maneki Neko, which means beckoning cat.
Is this where Hello Kitty comes from?
Yes-ish. We will actually address that later. They are definitely... That is related. That's not seemingly unrelated. Maneki Neko, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. Apologies to the country of Japan. But Beckoning Cat and Hello Kitty are for sure related. So, interesting thing is the cat is not waving at you, Jason. He is telling you to come here. The motion of a hand moving forward and the palm face down, fingers pulling towards you in Japan is how they motion for you to come here, in much the same way that we would palm up, bringing the hand towards ourselves in the United States and in much of Europe. In Japan, it is the other way around. So it is beckoning cat.
It's really rude, isn't it? It's really rude to do it the way that we do it, isn't it? Because when I went to Japan...
Oh, in Japan.
When I went to Japan, my sister was like, first thing she told me, don't beckon anyone. It's like the rudest thing you can do. And the whole time I was there, I was like, I want to beckon people so badly.
I gotta tell you, Naomi, I'm pretty sure pretty much everything we do is rude in Japan. To be fair, I think pretty much everything we do is probably rude here too. We're just accustomed to it.
Genuinely, I had to hide my whole personality when I was there. Because my whole personality is offensive in Japan.
Yes, when I was in Japan, I also held an entire phone conversation while I was on the train like an asshole. I did not feel good after that.
As the only one of us who's never been to Japan, I hold the distinction of having never embarrassed us in another country. So, hey, everybody, I'm winning.
I got to a traffic light, where you have to stop at every road. And you have to wait for the green man, and you have to, no matter if there's no traffic. And it was the middle of the night, there was no one about, there's no traffic. And I turned around to my mum and I was like, I can't fucking live like this anymore. And I stormed across the road with a red man. And that was when I broke. I was like, I'm not civilized, all right?
This is the lowest stake act of rebellion I can think of. I walked when it said do not walk. Oh, you don't know, Jason, that is not illegal at all in the UK. Jaywalking is not a crime. British people are always like, what? You get, if you just cross the street randomly, you could get a ticket and
I walk wherever I damn well like.
Rugged individualism.
I was going to say, Naomi, I'm pretty sure that was the slogan of the British Empire.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
I walk wherever I damn well want. So, yes. Maneki Neko, beckoning cat, is telling you to come in. Come on in. This is a store. This is a restaurant. This is a laundromat. Come on in and say hi. But why is it, as you noted, kind of a pan-Asian thing. It's not just at anime stores or Japanese restaurants. It's at Chinese restaurants. It's at Chinese laundrettes. I've seen it at Thai restaurants. Saw it at a Thai restaurant in Dubai. Hell of a weird combination to encounter. But yeah, it's become this global symbol of, yeah, you're about to spend money at an Asian establishment. How did this happen?
They want to let you know that they are guarded against rats and the plague, right? So it's just that, like, hey, the cat is here. There is a cat. The food is safe. It's hygienic. This is like maybe back in the day it was kind of like bodega cats in that it was real cats. And then eventually that turned into a symbol. We're like, okay, they're letting me know that there's a guard cat here and I don't have to worry about sanitary conditions. And then that eventually just turns into a tradition. That is my completely ignorant guess.
Man, Jason, I didn't even have to do research this week. You are on fire.
Whenever we do food episodes, I do very
You're
well.
ready, baby. Jason knows wrestling, comic books, food stories. Let's go. The original sort of introduction of cats into Japanese society, we don't know exactly when, like, cats, any species of cats, made their way to Japan, but most likely it's sometime in the first millennium BCE, and it's because of connections with China and India where cats became domesticated and they made their way to Japan. And actually, cats are revered with a certain amount of reverence, I guess, but they're thought of as being really important because they're really effective at managing pests around the silk trade, specifically. So merchants who were engaged in the silk trade would have cats because then they could keep things from eating the worms, from eating the silkworms, and from damaging the silk. And so having a cat meant that you made more money because less of your silk was damaged, so cats became associated with prosperity.
So what you're basically saying is that cats have been bougie bitches from the beginning.
Correct. I mean, if you look at the history of cats, man, in ancient Egypt, that's when we started, like, feeding them and, like...
You have never sounded more like a stoner guru than the moment that you went, that's the thing about cats, man. Like,
Listen, man.
I could
Think about
smell...
cats, man.
I could smell the patchouli oil.
So that's how cats became associated with prosperity, but beckoning cats specifically has, like, a dozen or more origin stories in Japan, with probably I'll tell you two. One that's, like, maybe sort of mythologically the most likely, and then the other one is perhaps a more relevant in terms of its popularity. So one is from the Gotokuji Temple, which is today in southwest Tokyo, where a cat, allegedly during the Edo period, so that would be, like, anywhere between the early 1600s and the, like, mid to late 1800s. There was a horrible storm, like a really bad lightning storm, and this daimyo, and a daimyo, for those of you not familiar, are like nobility, sort of warlords, I guess, would be the way to think of it in this period in Japanese history. So the people who serve the shogun, effectively. He was walking around in this thunderstorm, and a cat beckoned him into the temple, and he decided to listen to the cat, and as soon as he stepped into the temple, a lightning bolt struck where he had stood when the cat beckoned him in. So he's like, well, clearly this cat saved my life. And so this, if again you're looking at the YouTube, got a picture of what that temple looks like today. They've got a shitload of them. They have thousands of beckoning cats, and they claim to be the origin story of beckoning cat.
You know how I know that that's not true? Cats don't give a shit about you. Like, I hate to tell you this. That cat don't give a shit about you. So
It's entirely possible that he saw a cat and that cat like scratched its nose and walked in, but surely no cat has cared enough about another human to be like, "Come out of the storm, honey child."
unless that man had a packet of churro in his hand, then that cat did not care to save him. All right, so that's origin number 1.
Yeah, that's origin number 1, and this is sort of when, like, because originally, before they became associated with shops, the beckoning cat was at temples.
But I do think it is funny, not ha-ha, maybe funny in a oy vey kind of way, that there are so many elements in life, and this cat being one of them, that starts as a religious idea or a religious iconography and now has transitioned almost fully into a capitalist iconography, right? You're like, this started in the temples and it moves to the shops.
Yes. And the thing is, the shops are always like, I mean, I'm not always, but most of the temples that I've visited personally, and I've been to like 30, I guess, total, 20 something, like they've had marketplaces and stalls on your way up to the temple. And then when you get in the temple, you buy things. Like I bought like a charm for a friend who had actually just been hit by a car. Like she was fine, but like she busted her hip up a little bit in getting hit by a car. And I bought her a charm to ward off against traffic accidents.
You were a little late. You should have. Maybe it would be nice of you, Andrew, to pick things and then give people charms before the bad thing happens, right? Like maybe don't say something nice about someone after they die. Maybe you should get Naomi trying to think of something that's funny but not as offensive as I could go. You should get Naomi like a don't get heartbroken by a drunk DJ charm.
Yeah.
We're a little too late for that too.
No, I've been on a date, 2 dates with someone new. So if you could get me that charm soon, that would be useful.
So the other origin story goes way later. So in Asakusa, Tokyo, the Imado Shrine has the Marushime no Neko, the good fortune cats, sitting outside. The legend goes that in 1852, an old woman living in Imado was so poor she could no longer feed her pet cat and was forced to let that cat go. And then that night, the cat came to the lady in her dreams and said, "If you make dolls in my image, I will bring you good fortune." And so she did. And then she sold them there at the shrine, which we can prove because if you look at Utagawa Hiroshige's marketplace woodblock from the 1860s, you can see the dolls that are Beckoning Cat being sold outside of the Imado Shrine.
Again, though, why didn't the cat give her that news before it got put out on the street? Right? Like, we're a little late, brother. You could have given that information, and then you could have had a warm bed to sleep in.
I mean, it's very Buddhist. You must experience suffering before you can achieve enlightenment. Think about that.
I do all the time.
You do all the time. See, you're at the door of enlightenment, Jason.
Yeah. It's locked, unfortunately.
So we therefore have documentary evidence that at least by the 1850s, these beckoning cats are being sold at the Imado Shrine. They're outside of, and they're taking up all the space at the Gotokuji Temple. That doesn't explain how it gets to the rest of the world, right? Like, we've got this clear idea of how it gets around Japan, and it's clearly associated with wealth. So if you put a beckoning cat out, you're saying to the world, right, like those silk traders who associated cats with wealth, I've got money, this is a comfortable place to be, come and spend time here.
Can I be maybe a little bit obtuse for a second?
Go ahead.
Isn't the answer just going to be immigration? Like, there's a cultural, any kind of cultural tradition and how it spans across the world is that people from that culture go to other places and then bring their cultures with them. Or is there something more specific?
So that's the thing. you're not wrong. Immigration is definitely a part of it. But who is immigrating and why exactly this symbol in particular and not other ones came along for the ride? Like lanterns, like lighting lanterns that fly up in the sky, that didn't really come over until much more recently. But the beckoning cat has been around for actually quite a while in the West. I think, I cannot prove this, but I think there's an example from the 1920s, but I can't prove that, but certainly the 1960s.
Well, this is just
certainly
like early cat videos on the internet, right? Like, it's just going to show that throughout the entirety of human history, if you put a cat on something, people are like, ah! It doesn't, it's like you and me, right? It's like, it gives me just enough attention to make me want to love it, but not enough to make me feel fulfilled. Cats!
Cats! I have a hypothesis, though. And I base this hypothesis off of some very specific research that has been done in California by some students working for a professor who I did contact to get some insight. Professor Bill Maurer, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, from the Department of Anthropology at UC Irvine. So I did contact him to chase this up, but he had some students who did some very interesting research. And the thing about beckoning cat is eventually it became really closely associated with the Yoshiwara Pleasure District in Tokyo. So
I'm going to regret saying this potentially, but legitimately earlier on when you were like, it went from the temples to the shops, my first joke response was, oh, like prostitution.
yes,
and now
Jason.
I feel like I was probably actually more on point than I thought.
Yes, Jason. So Yoshiwara Pleasure District was established in 1617 as the floating paradise, a part of Tokyo that was like all sort of swampland and not very useful for agriculture. So the Yoshiwara Pleasure District, interestingly enough, it's primarily known as being a place for brothels and sex workers.
Yeah, but someone went there just because the pancakes, like...
Yes, much like one might go to the strip club because the wings deal is really good.
Really good, yeah.
They're really good, and it's like 25 cents a wing, and you're like, I can sit in the corner. This is fine. But Yoshiwara, interestingly enough, because sex work is a little different in Japan than we necessarily think of it in the West. So in the Anglo-French American tradition, sex workers are most commonly people who have few other options in employment because it fits a Judeo-Christian narrative of
shame.
Shame, correct. Of shame.
Literally,
Shaming women.
Right. That's yes. Like that, isn't that the biggest difference is the idea that one is shame and one is looked upon with at least a degree of reverence, may not be the right word, but
utility though. It's more utility than anything. Like this sex work in Edo society, less so once the Meiji Revolution happens, but in Edo society, it was considered like it's part of the functioning of like particularly the upper class. So in a society in which marriage is strictly a political, like once you get to a certain class in Japanese society, marriage is a political choice, period. There are no love marriages. That's not a thing. You get married because your clan needs to make peace with this other clan in order for your family to consolidate some kind of power and holdings and standings. The only connection you're probably going to have with another human being is going to be through the intimacy you can experience as a direct result of sex work, which is a perspective on sex work we don't often see in the West.
And much like most things that are complicated and have multiple layers to it, there's elements of what you just described that I think is far more positive than the situation that we kind of think about as it relates to sex work in terms of the lack of stigma, but also you described a deeply bleak dystopian description of human relationships in the larger degree society. So, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, and like it is a really very complicated story. We are one episode of a podcast. We would have to spend 30 episodes to scratch the surface on this. Two things worth noting. One is that in a deeply male-dominated society, to this day, Japan ranks exactly 2 positions higher than Saudi Arabia on the UN's, like, how good is this country at treating women? It does not do well. Japan is... whether or not it's misogynistic, one can debate. I think the answer is pretty clearly yes, but it's definitely paternalistic, as all get out. Men have all of the power in Japanese society. More so even than...
I was just going to say...
What? Yes,
Hello,
woman?
I'm a woman and I would like to speak on this. A woman who has been to Japan. And now for something completely unrelated.
No!
Would you like, as men, just to carry on discussing it? Should I bust out?
Please.
I would no, I'd actually very much like to stop talking about it.
I wasn't even going to say anything that inspiring. I was just going to say that when I went there, they had women-only carriages on the tubes. But then what was interesting is there was loads of men in them. So, but I think it was made to like make it more safe for women to travel because they weren't considered to be safe traveling. When we're having to put women in different carriages because they're not safe for men, it feels dodgy.
So it's a very paternalistic society. That is clear, especially in the Edo period. So what's interesting is that outside of marriage, sex work is one of the only ways that women could move up the class ladder. By sleeping with influential men, particularly here in Tokyo, right, in the Yoshiwara Pleasure District, they could also indirectly influence government. There are examples, particularly when the shogun takes on a concubine or a sex worker, it is often attributed in the history books her influence on him, or his influence sometimes, until 1868. The majority, so this is the real dark side, though, of that sex work. Yes, it was possible to move up the social ladder as a woman, but the majority of sex workers were sold to brothels by their families without their explicit consent. So, yes, there is a certain empowerment to the sexual autonomy of sex work in Japan during the Edo period that is also sex trafficking at the same time. Two things can be true at the same time. So it's a complicated story. But by the mid-18th century...
Do you remember when you said you were going to take us on a fun ride?
I immediately remembered how wrong I was as soon as we went down the rapids that looks nice, but that's because halfway down the trip, we just hit a cliff. We just fall right into the middle of nowhere. So these places became more and more accessible to wider and wider parts of society. It stopped being exclusively the samurai class, and the middle classes started to have access to these same spaces, which made more legal protections for sex work possible. And so, a lot of market towns, a lot of ports start to get their own pleasure districts. It becomes legal to engage in sex work within certain boundaries. There are like actual like protections and insurance if, for example, a patron is to harm a sex worker in a way that is debilitating. But it also meant that the demand for sex workers skyrocketed in the 18th century. It becomes extremely popular as more and more people have the ability to afford more sex work, which means that there are loads of people from all classes engaged in visiting brothels. Just so many people, loads of people are getting access, which means more and more brothels appear, and then they have to like advertise. They're competing with one another. People had to design shop signs to go out in front of brothels to be like, yo, this is a brothel, come in here. The most common sign that you would put out in front. Now remember, this is late 18th century, early 19th century Japan. The majority of the population is illiterate, so you can't put a sign with too many words on it.
You just put chicken wings and pancakes and people come running.
No, even better, keep it simple. They would just put dicks outside. They would put carved penises outside of the brothel and be like, this is a brothel. Dick.
This is what Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game, was missing. There was all the, like, you walk up to the place and you're like, oh, this is an item shop because there's an arrow on it, or this is the clothing shop because there's a t-shirt on it, and they are missing the shop with a dick right in front of it.
Yeah.
That is a terrifying penis.
If we look at this example of an iron sculpted penis from the Edo period, you will notice
it's a cat with a penis head. The head of a penis.
It is a penis.
It's a penis with feet where underneath where the testicles would be and the waving cat hand. So I just like to give you the full description. This is a stone statue of a penis anthropomorphized to have balls that look like thighs, little feet on the bottom so it can stand up, and a waving cat hand on the side. It is Lucky Dick.
I love it. It's so cool.
It is a beckoning penis, Jason. It's a beckoning penis. Which is why I believe this anthropology department at the University of California, Irvine, that their research is accurate. So,
hey, what is their research? What did they come up with? I don't think we've said it.
So there were the giant penises out front. I'll take this.
It's so distracting. I literally the whole time I was just looking at it.
YouTube is gonna. I
wasn't listening to anything you said then. I was just looking at the beckoning cat penis.
The majesty.
The beckoning penis, yeah. So that beckoning iron penis is an example. But so they note that in 1872, as the Meiji Restoration comes into play, Japan's experiencing a radical change in government. We're moving away from the shogun system into a new sort of constitutional monarchy situation in which the emperor is still like the figurehead of the state and is still descended from God, but the Diet, which is the bicameral legislature of Japan to this day, they are really the ones doing all of the business. It becomes a republic. It's when Japan becomes a republic, basically, under the Meiji era. This was, of course, inspired because the United States in the 1850s rocked up with a bunch of guns and said, you will trade with us or we will invade you. And Japan opted to trade with the United States because the United States wanted access to whatever, money, whatever they could get from Japan. And this new Japan wanted to be more like Western countries so that it could catch up, because it felt it had lagged behind your Britons, your Frances, your Americas, et cetera, and it wanted to catch up and lead Asia as its own imperial power, because they learned all the wrong lessons. They are the Killmongers. of the real world, where they were like, maybe we should learn to be as violent as the people who oppress those in Asia. And then World War II started. Oh, get your bingo card out. I said it. So they start westernizing. And one of the things that they did was they passed a bunch of laws about the moral protection of Japanese citizens, including it became illegal to show pornographic images in public.
Which is why, to this day, pixelated pubes on Japanese pornography.
Correct.
The most letter of the law, but not the spirit thing that I think maybe exists in the world.
Correct. That's also where tentacle pornography came from. Tentacles are technically not penises.
Love finds a way.
Yeah, it became illegal to show dicks in public. So they swapped the dicks for beckoning cats. That's what these folks at UC Irvine say.
They just swapped penis for pussy.
Hey, there you go, Jason. They changed the beckoning penises and they put in the beckoning cats. That's why. But again, I saw this iron beckoning penis and I thought, oh my God, they're totally right, because they're the only people who have done this research. I haven't found anyone else who supports UC Irvine's student-based research. That does not mean it's wrong. I just tend to like to have multiple sources. So when I saw that an antique shop on eBay was selling this iron beckoning penis that was from the Edo period, I was like, holy shit, maybe they're right.
So you're telling me that in large part, the journey is the beckoning cat goes from being religious iconography to being sexual iconography to being general capitalistic iconography, which...
We haven't even gotten there, Jason. This is just to establish the connection. Yeah, so this is to establish the connection between beckoning cat and sex work.
Society did a lot of work connecting the metaphor of cats and the metaphor of sex work long before we sat down for this podcast.
Because this does not yet explain why this is a global phenomenon. This explains so we understand how it takes root in Japan, but from the 1870s, it becomes really closely associated with sex work in and around Tokyo especially. But there's another thing that happens at that same time, right? So there was a legal case in Kanagawa called the Maria Luz case, in which a Spanish vessel was taking a bunch of indentured servants from China to Peru, and he stopped at Kanagawa to, get supplies and get settled. And someone escaped from the boat and was basically pled for sanctuary. And the court in Kanagawa was like, well, the law of Japan is that forced servitude is illegal. So they basically seized the cargo of the Maria Luz and were like, you can't have slaves. Sorry, we don't let that happen in Japan. And since you're in our jurisdiction, we're taking those slaves off of you.
Now, legitimate question. Is this a change from back when women could be sold into prostitution? Or is that somehow considered not slavery because that's a different... is this hypocrisy or was there a change in the law?
So, it created quite a problem in Japan because everyone said what you just said. What about sex worker contracts, which are called shogi contracts, which are 7-year contracts, which they don't necessarily have to, they don't get a choice. And the government of Japan had a choice. It could smack down the Kanagawa's court's decision, return these people to the Maria Luz, and basically have, at a time of revolution, at a time in which they're trying to change and become more Western, basically destabilize their own judicial system. Or it could uphold the Kanagawa ruling piss off Spain and release all sex workers from their contracts. And they chose the latter.
So they chose to totally disrupt the system.
Yeah,
Good on them.
every sex worker in Japan was released from their contract simultaneously.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. And
I just want to make sure. This sounds like a good thing. Is this, I mean, I'm sure it has unintended consequences,
Yes,
but
of course.
conceptually, this is a good thing. This is a conceptual fuck yeah, and then as all things in life, complicated because maybe now they don't have money and there's infrastructure and like once something becomes embedded in society, but on like a general rule, we're like good, the slavery is done. Is that correct?
so, yes, the sex slavery in Japan of Japanese people until World War II is done.
That's a lot of caveats.
What happens in Japan, though, because you still need brothels, is that brothel owners went from owning the people to owning the real estate, right? Like McDonald's.
Like real, like true Western expansion.
Yes, yes. So they would rent the rooms out to these women for flat fees, and then whatever they did in that room was up to them. They could negotiate their own wages, they could negotiate with Johns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The brothel would, of course, like help a little bit with, advertising, because, you want to make sure they can pay the rent and all that sort of thing. It's this independent contractor situation. Now, you know what happens in independent contractor situations, Jason? Who gets taken the most advantage of in an independent contractor scenario?
The contractor.
Yeah, and specifically, the immigrant contractor. So, as I already said, this all started because someone was taking indentured servants from China over to Peru, right? And he stopped over in Japan. The second half of the 19th century is a secret slave trade period in global history.
Well,
So-
I hate that.
You're likely familiar with the roughly 1500 to early 1800s African slave triangle.
Yes, I am likely familiar with the darkest chapter of American history.
It turns out, Jason, that pales in size to the indentured migrations of the second half of the 19th century, which mostly come from India
Holy shit.
to East Africa, South Africa, and again to the Caribbean, and from China to the west coasts of the Americas.
And given that we're talking about Japan in this, I'm going to guess that it's not the case. Is this also the European colonizers that are running this, or is this totally different?
Yes. So just
Oh.
like the Maria Luz, like it's Spanish ships, it's Dutch ships. Now, indentured servitude is not the same as chattel slavery. They do not pass on their enslaved status to their children, and they tend to have fixed term contracts. But those fixed term contracts can be changed all the time at a whim of whoever. Japanese people also experience this, wealthy Japanese people being part of the slave traders in this case, and poor Japanese people being indentured servants being sold into forced labor. But this is where we get quite a lot of the Japanese migration to the United States. Remember, we talked about in the Spelling Bee episode.
Oh no, I see
The
where this
Chinese-
is going.
Yeah, the Chinese people who were involved in the building of the railroad.
Yeah. I don't want to get too far ahead of the game, but I'm going to put out my theory. Are you positing that this cat basically spread around the world due to the indentured servitude of sex slaves?
Yes, I am, Jason. Yes, I am. That is my hypothesis.
And you thought we were doing a fun episode about cats.
This is what you do in your free time.
You thought we
by
were
the
talking
way.
about waving cats. So, sucker.
Joke's on you, motherfucker!
I already knew what this episode was about.
Yes, so domestic servants were actually one of the larger groups of indentured servants that came over. There's obviously a number of Chinese servants who come over and build the railroad, but for a lot of, in the United States, for a lot of the Pan-Asian migration, so Southeast Asia, Japan, China, there's a number of people working in domestic servitude, and that included brothels. So, I took a look at the prevalence of brothels in San Francisco, for example, because that was the largest port of arrival for Asian immigrants to the United States during this period of indentured servitude. And what you'll see, again, if you're on the YouTube, but for Jason right now, is that all of the green buildings are brothels of Chinese people.
So there are some districts, basically. This is a grid map that I'm looking at with lots of different buildings. There's different colors, and particularly in two grids, there are concentrated section of what would be Chinese brothels.
Right. It's a very interesting story, because if you were to sort of overlay this map, a lot of those green buildings, they're Chinese restaurants now, and they're Chinese laundromats, and they're Chinese herbal tea shops. A lot of them. And that seems to actually have been in pretty normal stories. I cannot guarantee you that the people running those Chinese restaurants in San Francisco today descend from people, or that those businesses were like handed over from brothels. But what I can tell you is that Japanese people and Chinese people in the United States were often mixed up and treated poorly because of racism.
Right.
That Japantown and Chinatown were lumped right next to each other in San Francisco and had a very large population. And that beckoning cat, Maneki Neko, was in Japan associated with brothels, which also at that same time experienced a significant growth in Chinese and Korean women who worked for cheap, like renting those rooms. Well, renting those rooms, whether or not they were consenting is a matter of debate. Renting those rooms, and a lot of those Japanese women having to find work elsewhere at the exact same time that there's a massive migration of millions of people from East Asia to the Americas, many of whom are indentured servants. So my hypothesis, my educated guess, is that is how Beckoning Cat came to the Americas.
And also came to be a Pan-Asian symbol rather than...
Correct. I've got some more evidence in a seemingly unrelated place to support not only my case that this connection between sex work and Beckoning Cat is a part of its popularity, but also explains when this became a global phenomenon where we think Beckoning Cat must be associated with Asian stuff. What do you know about Hello Kitty?
Clearly not enough, given that this is the segue. I know that Hello Kitty is a popular Japanese animated character.
And it's kawaii.
Kawaii, which means cute in Japanese. Hello Kitty was created in 1974 by this woman, Yuko Shimizu, who began working for the Sanrio Corporation. So Hello Kitty is a part of the Sanrio staple of animated characters, including the only other one I know off the top of my head, Keroppi. The cute little frog. But,
okay, I know the frog. I didn't know the name was Keroppi.
Yeah, Keroppi. Fun things about Hello Kitty. Well, Sanrio first is a company that before 1974 specialized in like making little rubber sandals and little plastic purses for
Crocs,
small,
basically.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Jelly, yeah, but that had strawberries on them. For the under 5 set, you know what I mean? Like little girls, just so that they can be like mommy walking around and being fancy. And so Yuko Shimizu is an illustrator. She went to work for Sanrio in her 20s, and their boss was like, we need a new design. We need like a best-selling product. And she just had that word in her mind, kawaii, that Naomi mentioned. It just means cute. She just thought, kawaii. I want this to be kawaii. And she came up with Hello Kitty, a white cat with a red bow in her hair. It took her 3 days to make it. That's it. And then she went to her assistant and she said, what do you think? Like, let me look at this. And her assistant said, I think that is the cutest thing ever. You should put that on purses.
I was really hoping that the assistant saw the image and then immediately said, Hello Kitty. And that's how the origin of the name happened.
Yeah. So the funny thing about Hello Kitty is not a cat.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Hello Kitty is a small British schoolgirl who wears cat ears.
I'm sorry,
and
what? Wait,
has
no.
a cat.
What the, wait. What the fuck?
Of all
That's-
the things we've talked about in this
That
episode,
makes-
I'm sorry.
this is what takes Jason to
that
this
makes
moon.
absolutely
Wait.
no sense. And now for something completely unrelated.
I'm looking at this thing and it's a fucking cat.
That's a cat.
That's a cat.
It's a tiny British schoolgirl
No.
has
No, it's not.
cat ears because she loves cats. The doll is not technically Hello Kitty. The doll says Hello Kitty.
Wait. So do I ever see the British girl? Like, I'm sorry. Is the thing that I'm looking at, is
Yes.
the cat that I think of as Hello Kitty, is that a cat or is that not Hello Kitty?
That is the person that is saying Hello Kitty, that we call Hello Kitty, that is now called Hello Kitty. That is a person.
No, it's a fucking cat. It's a cat that's been anthropomorphized, but that's a fucking
It's a
cat.
cat.
I have to do something. I'm so sorry. We're gonna have a brief cameo, everybody. Brittany, can you come here for a second, please? Please look at this. Is that a cat?
That's Hello Kitty.
Is that a cat? Are you looking at a cat?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
So, Yuko created Hello Kitty in 1974. It was a modest success. It did do well. And then at the age of 27, she left Sanrio and retired from working as an illustrator. Now, it's 1970. It's 2 years later. So it's 1976. Why would a 27-year-old woman suddenly retire from her lucrative career of making British cat children?
This feels like a trap. This
Because it is.
Yeah, this feels like a trap. I have an answer, but I don't.
What is it?
No, I'm gonna make you say it.
Yeah, no, she got married and had a child.
Yes. Okay. She got pregnant. That was good.
Yeah,
like,
she got married, and then the expectation was she would have a child.
Yeah. All right. Listen. You're
which she did.
You said it, not me.
Yeah,
But yes, she
Which
got
she
pregnant.
did do.
Was definitely what I thought of.
And she wasn't fired from Sanrio, but Sanrio did sort of go, "Oh, you got married, so when are you leaving?"
Because that's when
that
women's
is-
lives end.
Yeah, that is, Jason, you made a face, still pretty commonly practiced in most of the Fortune 500 companies in Japan. There's a reason that there are so few women at the executive level.
And why the
in-
population is probably shrinking if women realize that by the very nature of having kids will destroy their career and the lives that they've crafted for themselves.
God, gee, I wonder.
And kids are really snotty as
interesting.
well, so that's another thing.
Especially when they're
Literally,
cats.
Especially when they're cats.
So, the longest running ambassadors, Yamaguchi Yuko, right? So, Yamaguchi Yuko took over like at the tail end of the 80s, right in that Japanese economic bubble starting to collapse period. And she is responsible for why Hello Kitty is the huge international global success story.
A
that Hello
household
Kitty is.
name.
Yes. So, as ambassador of Hello Kitty, what Yamaguchi Yuko would do and actually all ambassadors of these characters tend to do, is they go to stores and they do like signings and they do like little freehand drawings of the character and blah blah blah. You know, like a comic book creator would do. Like they're going to represent the character and like connect with the fans. And Yamaguchi Yuko's really good at this. She loves being the person that makes Hello Kitty. Deep passion for her. She started noticing that a lot of the young girls, a lot of the high school and university aged girls and women that she was encountering in the shop, they weren't involving themselves. They were discussing something called enko or enjo, depending on how it's pronounced. But it's means compensated dating. So this is 1995, which means young women go on dates, air quotes dates, with older men for money. She asked, in 1995, she asks these young women, why are you doing this? Why are you selling yourselves to these salarymen, these oftentimes creepy older men, you know, what do you want? And what they said was, they wanted to buy expensive stuff. They wanted like Gucci and Balenciaga and fancy makeup and whatever. Because in the Japanese economic bubble period from the 70s into the 80s, consumer culture built on luxury was the name of the game. It became a middle-class symbol to conspicuously consume. Same phenomenon happening in the United States and the United Kingdom. This is the era of conspicuous consumption. Thank you, Reagan and Thatcher.
And the whales.
And the whales.
Please go back and check our episode about sperm whales and the Iron Lady to learn about how indirectly sperm whales are the reason that young Japanese women were going out with creepy older men.
So in 1991, when the Japanese bubble collapses and suddenly people don't have as much money, those same middle-class women who, again, they don't necessarily have a lot of great ways to move up in society. The only option for these young women to experience that relative level of comfort is to get married. But as you've already pointed out, Jason, if you get married, you have to leave your career and have children. And so there was this like opposition to growing up. Young women in Japan, well into their late 20s and 30s, wanted to live like girls because that meant they weren't married adults who had to give up their career. So they wanted Hello Kitty stuff because it was something that little girls have. And the only way they could afford to get it was to operate in these very loose, informal sex work arrangements through compensated dating.
Basically, honestly, remarkably similar to what you described about the Edo period with certain
Correct.
things changed. Yeah.
Some things never change. So these are two things happening at the same time.
Okay.
They want like Balenciaga. They
also want Hello Kitty.
But they also want Hello Kitty. So Yamaguchi says, if I make you bags that look like designer bags and have Hello Kitty on them, would you stop engaging in sex work because we can make it at a more affordable price? And people were like, yes, of course we would do that. And that's fucking exactly what happened. Hello Kitty became a global phenomenon because Yamaguchi wanted to stop young women from engaging in sex work in order to afford designer bags, because she knew that Sanrio could make all the things that they want at the prices that they could reasonably afford. That brings it all back. As you said, it's the same thing with the sex workers trying to move up in Edo society. they were using sex work to try to move up in, this modern post-bubble economy society. But the difference is that Yuko Yamaguchi cut off the need for sex work. Now, that's not to say that compensating dating isn't still a thing, but she found a way to break that cycle through, of course, a woman taking power and actually seizing her own destiny. All of that, I think, connects back to Beckoning Cat in that there's this connection that exists between the cute cat and sex work. That one's the obvious surface level connection, right? It seems like these things have a strange repeating history.
What did I learn today? The cat hand motion is welcoming me. I had no idea. I thought it was making biscuits, but it is telling me to come on in a I've never seen, like, I watch a lot of Japanese wrestling and I've never seen that motion used to be like, come at me, bro. And I hope that I will one day. And of course, the most mind-blowing and exasperating thing that I've heard in a long time, that apparently Hello Kitty is supposed to be a little English girl. This isn't quite Jesus's Briss's New Year's Day level, but like it's encroaching on the territory. What the fuck? That is a cat. I'll go to my grave knowing that that's a fucking cat. Anyway, Naomi, anything you'd like to plug today?
So I actually do have something to plug today, which is this is our first time properly recording the video. And so I'm going to be foraying into a new aspect for me, which is video editing. And I'm going to have lots of lovely social media clips that are going to be up on our Instagram page. So please head to our Instagram and you'll see lots of lovely clips of us during this episode. And you'll get to see our wonderful faces if you're not already watching us on YouTube. And you can comment saying whether we look like what you expected us to after listening to us for months.
You know what? I would like it if people would start following me on Letterboxd. You can find me at Seems Unrelated, because Seemingly Unrelated was too many characters for the username. But Seems Unrelated, you could find me on Letterboxd, where I am sharing my opinion on Nosferatu, a movie that I didn't like, along with a bunch of other movies. And I would love you to drag me for my opinions. Thank you.
You can go ahead and reach me via Instagram at Collected Possibilities. I am a freelance creative director, creative development consultant, writer, producer, and director, and I would love to work with you. So if you're looking to develop a podcast, or you have a brand or company and are looking to figure out how best to leverage your story, reach an audience, and create that, whether through audio or video medium, I would love to set up a chat. Go ahead and reach me at Collected Possibilities on Instagram, or Jason Howard on LinkedIn. Until the next time, what a wild ride. Andrew knows a lot. I do not. And we hope that it is at least moderately fascinating.
Bye.
Bye. No, wait, that means hello. Ah, well. Seemingly Unrelated is a Life's Little Murder Boards production. Created and hosted by Andrew Johnstone and Jason Howard. Audio production and editing services provided by Naomi Coe. Our artwork is by Megan Zemet. The theme song is Irizumi by Pistol Jazz. To find out more about everyone involved and access the show notes for this episode, visit us at seeminglyunrelatedpod.com.
I'm just writing notes like, the bit about pussy was good.
Naomi will cut this.
No, she's going to keep that in because Naomi's a weirdo.